Hey friends, thanks for tuning in. Gene Perry here with the Freehands Academy. For February's challenge, I'm going to be talking exclusively about Temple Audio pedal boards. I'm going to share everything I know over the next 4 sessions, and today I'm going to be talking specifically about size and whether or not size really matters. Thanks again for tuning into the channel, and welcome to the first session of the month-long challenge for February, which is to share as much as I know about Temple Audio pedal boards. We're going to look at 5 different boards today: the Solo 18, the Duo 17, 2 different iterations of a Duo 24, and then finally this massive Trio 36. I don't currently have any pedals on that board, but it provides a nice contrast for the pedals that do. In each case, I'll give you the approximate weight of the board as well as the actual surface area that you have to work with. I have a couple of best practices that I like to follow when using Temple Audio products that I've learned over the years, and relative to the various different sizes that we'll be looking at, I'll be sharing that as we go. This is the Solo 18. So this is a pedal board that is 18 inches wide and 8.5 inches deep. So about 21.6 centimeters deep and about 45.7 centimeters wide. Something to consider is that these white kind of beams on the side are about 5/8 of an inch wide, and it's actually good that they are that wide because they do add a lot of integrity to the board, right? So it's not flimsy, it's pretty solid, but that does leave you with about just over 16.5 inches of surface area. So I'll just measure that really quickly from the inner corners of the beam. And it's about 16 3/4, right? This board, in its current iteration, has about 4 powered pedals on the top, right? So I've kind of measured out the milliamps and the power draw for this and kind of based the power supply that I would need for this load out of pedals. And actually the highest draw is this Poly Blue Octave, which actually surprisingly draws about 265 milliamps. On the bottom, I'm using a Strymon Ojai, and this is the R30 version, and so this is a lot flatter, and this also can support, I suppose, an 18-volt pedal if you had it. Something to be aware of on the smaller board is that you have this second power supply, and so you just have to kind of consider where on this very small board these are going to be able to poke up. I also put an LED light on here because I did have one extra power supply. The Strymon provides power for 5 different and separate units. So why not have LED, right? Let's look at the approximate weight of this. It's about 7.45 pounds. I'm not quite sure what the metric equivalent of that would be, but there is the Solo 18 for you. So, looking at this board, you could fit some of these larger, kind of wider framed pedals on it and still have just enough room for a mini on top if you were angling it to the side, right? You could probably get away with 3 of those. If you had more standard sized pedals like a Boss pedal, you could probably get 4 across the front with as many minis on the top. So maybe 4 kind of boss-sized pedals with 3 minis on top. If you just want to stack up pedals on your board. Relative to this board, the intent of this board was just to have it as kind of like a pedal board I could play directly into a power amp. And so it just has, 2 channels, has reverb, there's a compressor, I use an octaver on it, and there's a tuner. So relative to this loadout, the Solo 18 is just the perfect size. Right. So one last look there. And then in terms of micro and mini modules, I just use the IEC Power and this 4X mod. And I had no real need for TRS, even though this accepts TRS. I'm just using TS throughout the board. There wasn't too much else that I needed for this particular board. The next pedal board I'm going to show you is the Duo 17. Let's take a look at that. The Duo 17 is 12.5 inches deep, so that's about 31.7 centimeters, and 17 inches wide, or about 43.18 centimeters wide, but really you're going to get about 3/4 of an inch knocked off of each side there. So you have about 15.5 inches of usable surface area, which is fine because it provides a lot of integrity for the board. Right. So these are actually slightly thicker than they are on the Solo board, but the difference is really negligible. Right. I don't know if you can see this. I'll try to get it up to the camera so you can, but if you look at the difference in widths between those, it's not really that great. Pretty minor, actually. So this board weighs in at about 8.1 ounces, or what looks to be 3.67 kilograms. And the slope on this is slightly larger from the top to the bottom, right? So about 2.25 to 1.25 inches from the lowest to the highest. I think the metric equivalent is about 5.71 centimeters to about 3.1 centimeters. I'm using this R30O high Strymon power supply. This one doesn't have LEDs, but it does have 5 pedals that need power. I think about that does it for the Duo 17. It's a pretty popular board, just about the right size for the kind of casual gig circuit without getting too crazy. So we'll look at another one of the Duo series next. We'll look at the Duo 24. So this is the pedal board that I use for my NS stick, and so this is also a board that's going to be 12.5 inches deep, or about 31.17 centimeters. This is going to be 24 inches wide, or just under 61 centimeters. And this particular board weighs in at 16 pounds, so twice as much of what the Duo 17 weighed in it. So I'm going to stack these just so you have some reference. So what this kind of illustrates is that adding the extra 7 inches of pedal board space allowed me to add a volume pedal and then also MIDI control. And so in the case of this board, all these pedals can be controlled via MIDI, which is, ultimately the dream at some point to be able to do. But I'm only controlling 2 of them using this disaster area as a DMC3XL. What else? The micro and mini mods, I'm adding a some mod. Actually, this one's a buffer mod, so this is an older one. They don't make them anymore, but this basically allows me to play mono. So we'll get into that in future episodes. looking at the bottom of this pedal board, you can see that the Zuma just barely fits underneath there. It might even scuff a little bit of the bottom there. So you might want to consider having your Zuma kind of ride, you know, kind of parallel to the board there. This board also makes use of the this kind of beam towards the center here, which kind of stabilizes it. You really do want to have this if you've got a duo board. I think that about does it for this one. This one's quite a bit heavier. So now what we'll do is let's take a look at a board that was done by Kathy with Tone Zone LA. So here is the board that was made by Tone Zone LA, and this is also a Duo 24. So this is going to be 12.5 inches deep, 24 inches wide. The only difference in this particular board per se is that because it's been done by a professional, you can see that all the audio cables are above the board. All right, so I'll see if I can get a little closer here and show you that. So you can see it's really thick in some areas there, right? And the reason, my understanding of it, my very kind of simple understanding is that you just tend to isolate your audio and your power signals. So when we look on the bottom of the board, you can see how she's configured it. And everything is so tidy. It's just long enough, right? She's tacked it down so beautifully. So she's made excellent use of this space here. You'll notice that there's no supporting central beam here, but I guess it doesn't really need it because the cabling's so tight. Everything's tucked away. And actually we have the signal chain for it right here. It was really impressive the way she wrote it out. Right? So it's documented so beautifully. Yeah, so a little shout out to Tone Zone LA. If you need a pedal board done, they can do this right. So this one weighs in at about 21 pounds. So about 20 pounds, excuse me. So just about 4 pounds heavier than my other board. So also a big board, but the same specs as the previous board. Okay, so let's look at the biggest board that I have here, and I'll kind of compare this with the other board so you can see just how big the Trio 36 is. Right, it barely fits on the camera. Try to sync that up. There, right. It won't even fit. Yeah. So let's compare this with the smallest board first. So if you put the Solo 18 right there, I mean, that's how big it is. It's like basically 3 of these across. So that's really big. Okay. This is yeah, the Trio. Is it the 36? Might be the 34. So this is just kind of contrasting and comparing the Duo 17 with just how big this thing is. Yeah. And then finally, just kind of gives you some perspective of just how massive this board is. You know, having it be 16 inches deep to set pedals up on. And I guess if you're using those big pedals, you need that kind of space. I don't really need that kind of space. Anyways, listen, that does it pretty much for the challenge. Kind of a different angle from what we were doing with the car stuff in the previous month, but I hope I was able to share any questions you may have had about just the various different sizes of Temple audio boards. I've really enjoyed using them over the past few years. They do have some limitations, but for me, the joy of setting up boards and configuring them just the way I want them using their kind of platform works out really nice. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, and hope to see you next week when I talk more specifically about the micro and mini modules and the ins and outs and ways you can kind of exploit TRS in your rigs. See you next week. Cheers.